Welcome to Cider Chat. In this episode, we're going into part 2 of a 4-part series titled Bringing the Bellies to the Bar. This was first presented at CraftCon 2021 in April of this year, and was part of the Three Counties Cider and Perry Association annual conference. And of course, this year it was virtual. So last week's episode, which was 274, we looked at who is your audience, and this week we're going to look at strategy, brand strategy. And of course, this is really relatable to any business in that having a strategy is key for bringing the bellies to the bar. Hello, my name is Rhea Wincaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
We'll be rolling out shortly with the featured conversation on strategy to bring the bellies to the bar. But first, a wee bit of news out and about in Ciderville. A big tip of the glass to Ted, who just became a patron of Cider Chat via the Cider Chat Patreon page. And I noticed, Ted, that you have a little Grateful Dead insignia on your profile. And here's a little tidbit of history for you that I think you would enjoy, and maybe others out there in Ciderville. If you don't know, Grateful Dead is a long-time rock and roll band that is just, it's just amazing. I love the Grateful Dead. And this will even show you a little bit more. My first podcast, called Leading Chaos Podcast, is all about my work in conflict management and the book I wrote on the topic. And I was able to secure the rights to use one of their songs as a lead-in to my podcast. I learned back then to not do that again because it just took so much time. But it was a cool process working with the family of the Grateful Dead and getting them to do that. And back then, people didn't know what podcasting was. I had to explain it every time I said I'm podcasting. And the Grateful Dead, the folks surrounding the family there, had no idea what podcasting was either. And it was a really interesting experience in the early days of podcasting to explain that. And they were all for it because part of that podcast is really helping people in very difficult situations and to shine a little love light on them, if you will, doing that through kindness and also to not meet violence or greater violence. So they're really for that. And that just speaks volumes of who they are. And it was such a privilege. So there you go. That's a little bit of podcasting history. In fact, my podcast is the first podcast and maybe the only podcast with permission to use a Grateful Dead song. So there you have it. Pretty cool, right? All right, then, let me take a little pause and we'll be right back with a letter from a listener of Cider Chat. This email comes in from Matt, who also, like Ted, happens to be a patron of Cider Chat. So thank you so much, Matt, and thanks to all the patrons out there. You really are keeping this podcast on the air. I wouldn't be able to do it without you. And before I go any further, if you want to become a patron of Cider Chat, it's really easy. Just go to the Cider Chat Patreon page. And if that doesn't work, there is a donate button at ciderchat.com. In this email, Matt writes, "Thanks so much for your deep dive into bottle conditioning. With yours and Ryan Monkman's help, I just finished bottling my first bottle-conditioned cider, an ambient ferment from a roadside pippin I found last fall. Once I racked off the lees, I had a little less than 3.5 liters, which fit perfectly into 5 22-ounce bottles. It is so satisfying when all that's left over is one last sip to remember what it tasted like still. Anyways, a couple questions for you. Lots of great info on how much sugar to add. He's talking about how much sugar to add to make your slurry. But how much yeast do you add for the conditioning process? Matt says he decided to go with 1 gram from my 1 gallon jug, since the 5-gram packet of dry yeast was good for 5 gallons. And he asks, can you add too much yeast? Does more yeast ferment faster, or do you end up with more lees at the bottom of the bottle? All right. So those are some good questions, and I just want to stop there and give you my answers to this. And I do need to kind of follow up with both the specialist in the yeast industry and Ryan on some of these other questions. But let me go to this first part here. Yes, sugar is part of the process for making a slurry. So is water, or you could use cider to make a slurry for bottle conditioning. So this is bottle conditioned cider is allowing you to create bubbles in your bottle. Bubbles in your bottle. I kind of like that. That's kind of a good name for an episode. Anyways, I digress. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the process here. He wanted to create bubbles in the bottle and wanted to make a slurry and only had 1 gallon of juice. Now, you're right. So for a 5-gallon jug, and I've been kind of struggling with this too because I didn't really talk to Ryan about this. And, sometimes commercial makers are really focused on the commercial aspect, though I do know he makes some amazing small batches of cider. So I think you were right on. 5 grams for 5 gallons, 1 gram for 1 gallon. It's kind of like a no-brainer. The thing is just to see how active your yeast is when making the slurry and really taking the time. I, like you, have been in that process most recently this past weekend, bottling some of my cider and making that slurry. And I want to say that when I skimmed on the yeast, my slurry wasn't as vigorous. That means it's just, it's like bubbling, and you could really tell that the yeast is happy. So that would be your biggest indicator. You really want to have good, happy yeast and a really solid looking slurry that then is going to pour into your 1 gallon jug. And the trick there is to really aerate, because yeast likes oxygen, and to do that slowly so you don't shock the yeast as it's going into that 1 gallon jug. So I think you got that right. And can you add too much yeast? Well, you kind of answered your own question. The more yeast you add, the more, a little bit of haze you'll have on the bottom of the bottle. So you got to kind of play with this. It's going to be dependent on what you're bottling, the quantity, and to just know that there's going to be some haze there. That's why people do riddling and the traditional champagne method to get rid of all that yeast. But, for you and I and so many other people, haze is cool. Haze shows that there is vitality in that cider, and no biggie, right? I have a lot of haze in my cider. Who cares? Let it either sit to the bottom or mix it in. Or as our good friends out at Little Pomona always say, shake to wake. And they'll do that all the time in ciders. Many people do. So it's more a issue of what you prefer. That's the main thing about having too much yeast. I don't think it's going to be a matter of it going too quickly or rapidly. That's going to really depend on how you then keep the bottles, where you keep them. Are they in the sunlight? Are they in a cool space? All those factors are going to come into play. And I'm going to hold that there because I could go much more deeper into bottle conditioning. But we're going to save some of your next questions on the yeast itself for another episode. But just so you know, Matt, when I bottled conditioned this weekend, I used the exact same yeast, 1118, to do my bottle conditioning. And I want to say it was really vigorous, and, you got to keep on testing this out to see what works for what you're making. I don't think there's really any kind of cut and dry here. And, we want these answers and we want it now, but it's an art. You got to go with it and move with the process. And it sounds like, and from the picture that you sent me of your beautiful bottle of Truxton Pippin, you're doing it right. So keep it up, and I'll keep on getting back to your questions when I have a little bit more time in each segment.
Walking through the orchard.
Walking in the orchard is fun to do for me any time of the year, whether the orchard is in full bloom or the trees are totally bare, because I just find those elegant trees, and pear trees too, apples and pears, it's all good. Just absolutely magnificent to behold. And if that's something that you like to do, and you like to do that with maybe a glass of cider in hand, then you might want to consider coming along on a Totally Cider tour with me coming up in 2022. You could see some past tours we did at the Totally Cider page at ciderchat.com. And if you'd like to get on the list, just send an email my way to info@ciderchat.com. ciderbrand.com.
Smelling all the blossoms.
I was just out smelling all the blossoms this morning on a wild azalea that is in my yard. It's pink in color, and I'll tell you, the fragrance coming off of that just, it's like an aphrodisiac. It's just amazing. Anyways, that's a fun thing to do, right? That's one of the things that we do on a cider tour. If we do it that time of year, so much fun. Anyways, next up, we're going to be going to our main feature, all on strategy. And again, this is from the Bring the Bellies to the Bar. It was a panel discussion held at CraftCon 2021. If you want to hear part one, go to last week's episode 274. There we begin talking about who is your audience. And the panelists are both myself and Cath Potter, who is a certified Pommelier. She hails from the UK. Adam Wells, who is a cider writer. He's also co-editor with Cider Review and works with Graphwood and contributes to Full Juice and Distilled Spirits. And also Nikki Kong. She is the owner of the Cat in the Glass, which is an online bottle shop selling cider. And I think actually Nikki now has beer too, if I am correct on that. Either way, I'm going to have links to all these folks in the show note to this here episode 275. I do recommend following them on Twitter. They're very active there, and they're just really great people. So where we left off last week was finishing up about talking about audience. And this week we're going to go right into strategy. And I'm going to allow us to roll into that. And then I'm going to have a little bit more follow-up at the tail end. So grab that glass and join this chat with the Bringing the Bellies to the Bar panel discussion from CraftCon 2021. So knowing your current audience and who you want your audience to be will help you with your next step on your strategy. So that's the next question we're going to go to. And I asked each of the panelists to provide maybe 3 different tips on a strategy that you are looking at. And I say this, and anybody listening, you might be going, oh, crap. I mean, I haven't thought about it this much. A strategy? Are you kidding me? But this is the reality of doing a business and attracting new customers, having some kind of strategy. So let's see what we have here. I'm going to, again, turn it back to Cath and see. Cath, do you have 3 tips of strategy for us?
Well, one I've already mentioned, really, which is the education side of it. The more people learn about cider, the more they are able to make educated, informed choices about what they're drinking. So CAMRA has a Learn and Discover program for the Campaign for Real Ale, in which cider has become quite prominent. And we are hoping that will grow. And we've also done quite a lot of publicising of the Pommelier course as well. And we found out just the other day that Felix Nash, who runs the Fine Cider Company, which is a wholesaler rather than a retail, and he supplies, excuse the dog, he supplies a lot of restaurants with cider. And apparently he's now, when he sells some cider to a restaurant, he's offering training to their staff. And this is definitely something that's needed. And I'm sure the people who are on here at the moment that run bars, also a lot of them are doing the same thing. We ran training for Nikki's staff at the Crown and Kettle. And I know that Susanna Mansfield has got a couple of her staff from their bars on the Pommelier course at the moment. So I think education is number one. The other thing is that because we're based in the city, the green thumb thing is a bit more difficult for us because we're not in that area where you can say to people, oh, come on, you could grow some apple trees. Or, I mean, we do have apple trees and we have lots and lots of street apple trees and scrumped apples and all the rest of it. And urban cideries are growing, which I also think will be a big thing in the future. But what we can do is encourage people to visit the orchards, go around the orchards, meet the producers, look at the trees, see the apples. And again, CAMRA is pushing that at the moment to its members, whether they be organised trips or just people go in and walk in the orchards. I'd shut up because I know that was only 2, but I think I've talked long enough.
No, that was great. I think getting out to the orchards is a key thing right now. This is such a hot thing. People are so cooped up, and this is a perfect time, blossom time, to get out there. Nikki, what do you have to echo with Cath there in terms of tips on strategy?
In terms of strategies for the cat in the glass, I think social media plays quite a big part in being able to showcase new stock, like new ciders, where I've been. Like another one's like the personal touch factor of actually a lot of the ciders that I get in, I tend to go and pick up myself. So I get to go and meet the makers and actually talk to them, see where the cider's been produced, how it's produced, and what's gone into it. And people tend to like the little stories or little quirks from like different places that I've been. And probably third thing, which I'm not very good at, admittedly, is having a regular, like, updated sort of blog or MailChimp to keep people in the loop of like what's new, what's coming up, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Yes.
People don't really understand how much social media does take. That's why people are specifically working towards that. And you're getting going, but having that as your line, and I think a lot of folks listening know that that's so important, and how do we keep on moving in that direction is really key. I'll speak a little bit to that, but I wonder, Adam, perhaps you might be able to speak to that too. What are you doing there in terms of strategy?
The first point, and the point it all revolves around, is just talking consistently whenever you've got something interesting to say. My 9 to 5 is in direct marketing, and a key kind of question around that is, how much should I be emailing customers? And the answer is, whenever you have something worth saying, whenever there's something pertinent and useful for that customer to know. So this applies whether I'm running the blog. The more often we provide interesting and relevant content, the more often people will come and read us. If you're a cider maker, the more often you're talking about what you've just made, how you've made it, the more engaged people will be. And obviously Nikki's already talked about how that kind of relates to being a retail business as well. And so that's the first point. Nikki's already said social media, which was going to be my second point. But yeah, again, that's just one of the easiest, I suppose, channels to do quick communication in these days. I'm biased, so I'm words, so I prefer Twitter. But obviously, some people are much better than me at Instagram. I'm a terrible millennial. Whatever channel you're using is just making sure that you're telling people what you're doing, you're engaging with them, you're saying thank you if people engage back to you. You're just building these lovely relationships. And the third point is going out of your way to engage with potential new audiences. So going back to what I was saying earlier, writing about cider on a whiskey site is weird, but it's a potential new audience that are likely to be receptive to long content about drinks. Thinking about what Cath does in Manchester, cider is inherently rural. It's, and therefore for a long time, it's being drunk by people who live in these rural places and are often of a certain demographic. But bringing cider into the cities is critical to taking the next step, because A, there are far more people and potential audiences in cities, and B, there are far more people who are in cities and aren't drinking cider or aren't having these great ciders presented to them. So that's absolutely critical when it comes to building a broader and more diverse audience as well.
Yeah, well said. In terms of the social media, what I see, just taking the hawk's eye view of the world, I see Twitter is used quite a bit in the UK as a conversation piece. It's almost like you're hanging out with each other in the comforts of your home. The way the dialogue goes back and forth, and it's really inspiring to me. So being in the US, I look at that and I'm a little feeling a little forlorn that the UK market has it going and the US market of makers and stuff don't chime in there. However, at the same time, Instagram is really where I see the US conversation going primarily. There's Facebook, but Facebook gets really populated by a lot of the same players. And Instagram gives you that ability to cover a spectrum of folks. And because you use hashtags, you're able to really populate your post and reach out. So I might do something like hashtag happy on my Instagram post. And if you look that hashtag up, you'll see it just, has like, 500 million different people are using that. And so that will populate to a different audience than I would do otherwise if I just do hashtag cider. So the key here is to getting out of the market of the same people. Not that we don't adore each other immensely. That's like key, right? It's like we keep each other going, but we want to kind of push it out a bit. So I think that's interesting. Something that I really notice is how do we get more people so they don't feel like it's an exclusive club. So really key, and we should never feel bad if we can't do it all. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my strategy that I use. Number one, my first strategy is to be everywhere. And that might sound really overwhelming, but I don't think it is. So I'm always staying on top of social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and even some on TikTok, which is just amusing and kind of kooky and fun, which is good for all of us. And it's really what cider's a little bit about too, being kind of kooky and fun and enjoying ourselves. With that, when I post on Instagram, I try to just post once a week so I don't overwhelm. And I wanted to go back to what you were saying, Adam. I've kind of struggled with that. Like, how often do I post something? Well, I could say every time I have something to say, but what do you do about fatigue? And how do you address that, especially from a long format writer? How do you deal with fatigue of the audience? And do you have any thoughts on that? Because I do worry about that when I'm sending out emails and such.
I can't obviously, in terms of just write. We don't have a MailChimp or anything like that with Cider Review. But I sort of take the view that, especially writing on a blog, those posts, when I put them up, they're not then going to disappear. So I've written a quite long piece recently, which I kind of pretentiously called a taxonomy of cider, which was just my attempt to just cast a big tent, but under which any conceivable cider could be identified and defined with as much information as possible. And that's a 4,500 word long read, and not everyone's going to have time or inclination to just read that the day that I post it. But I guess I take the view that it's there indefinitely now. People will find it. People don't have to read everything that I write every day if I'm publishing every day, which I can't imagine doing. But it's there. People can access that information as and when in their own time. And that's the thing with long form writing is and I guess podcasts as well is people don't necessarily have the 15-20 minutes to read a 1,500 word article or the hour to do a podcast, but the information and the content is there as and when they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. I'll speak to that in terms of the pandemic. I made a conscious decision over 2020 to decrease my podcast from an hour. Folks are not commuting. People are not doing the same, and they do not have that time. And so it's been a whole switch in my format to try to keep it within the 30-minute range, and the response has been overwhelming. So, time getting into the ears of people, such an intimate form. I don't want to waste people's time. And I think, just speaking on that, there's this feeling, I think it happens in both the industry and to our audience, of wanting to be included and feeling in the loop. And when there's almost too much information, it could be really overwhelming. Like, I can't keep up. Something's going on in Twitter here, cool stuff, and then Instagram, and how do I put that together? So do you ever think about that with your audience on that overwhelm factor, and also having people feel like I'm part of it, because that's a good feeling. That's a feeling that we really want to hold on to versus this is so overwhelming or it's so technical or I can't possibly even be witty enough to respond to that Twitter thing. I'm going to just sound like a jerk. I'm just going to send that up to the panel. So do you ever think about that? Or let me say it like this. Do you ever feel out of the loop?
Yeah, I think quite often I'll see what Adam's written this week, and I see it on a Monday, say, and then by Friday I might have got around to reading it. But I don't think that matters, because when I've read it on a Friday, then I retweet it, and a whole other lot of people then get to see the thing that Adam wrote last week. Do you know what I mean? And it's sort of it's self-perpetuating. But I just wanted to say something about Insta, because I've never understood Instagram at all. I can't see the point. You put your photographs on and everybody goes, oh, that's nice. Until Taz, girl with the cider review, started the No Apologies campaign. And she is a bit of an Instagram whiz. And we all started doing that. That we have a couple of people as well within Cider Women that are also Instagram focused. Lydia is very good at Instagram. And I think because of that, I sort of saw the point of it a bit more. And you do get a different audience on Instagram. Also, TikTok, one of our Cider Club attendees, sorry, this dog is driving me mad, is that age group. And she did like a little TikTok condensed video of a Manchester Cider Club and put it up on TikTok. And we were like, oh, we're on TikTok. Hey, that's good. But all these different things reach a different audience. And I think it's this inclusivity that we're aiming for now with cider. We're not aiming for the craft beer boys with the beards, but we are aiming for people who appreciate that. And there's a lot of women's beer drinking groups. There's in the UK, Crafty Beer Girls. There's one in Glasgow. There's one they're all over the place. Beers Without Beards that Nikki's supported for years. And if you talk to those women, they're interested in cider. Mm-hmm. Because it's something different. Yeah, they drink beer, but they're interested in cider. And cider, there's one way to put off a potential audience, and I've got to say this, and that is if you persist in having sexist or other derogatory imagery on your product. And sadly, we're still seeing it. And sadly, it's small within the cider group, but hence the No Apologies campaign. And hence this, it seems like continuous fight every few months. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. And that kind of wears you out. But you've got to keep on at it, because you will never grow your market and grow your sales if you are using imagery that would have been bad in the 1920s, never mind the 2020s. Mm-hmm. Sorry, yeah. That's my piece said.
I know that's in a hot topic right now, and it is a topic. And in terms of marketing, it gets cider out in the forefront for better or for worse. So in some ways, it brings the conversation to the forefront, and people are saying, "Oh, look what they're talking about," which might be welcoming to people who otherwise wouldn't even look this way to cider. Having been in the craft beer industry for so many years, I would say the same thing. The same topic has been part of that for quite a long time, and was really on the forefront of very big marketing ads. Before we go into that, because that does go on to enticing your new product, I just wanted to finish up on my strategy, which was one, to be everywhere. So Cider Chat is available on all podcast archives and whatnot. Consistency is absolutely important. And I think this would speak to any of the makers out there. Having consistent product, also being consistent at some kind of pattern. If you're doing some kind of social media, even if you could do that only once a week, just do it once a week. So people will look forward to it. You'd be surprised who's looking for something from you that week. And then quality, producing quality content. Ah, yes, consistency is important. If only once a week, do it at least once a week. And next week in episode 276, we will dive into a bit on content, specifically what entices our panelists to try new products. But let's dial it back to today's conversation, if only for a minute, on strategy. If you don't have a strategy, there is no time like the present to start. Going back to part 1 of the series, we discussed defining your audience, who it is, and equally important, who you would like your audience to be. Having step 1 in place, that is, of knowing your audience, helps you build a strategy for brand growth, which I assume is what we're all hoping for. And this is a key part of the equation that many struggle with, because craft cider is a craft. You might be a great maker, but selling isn't really part of your skill set. Go ahead. It's okay to admit that. And be honest with yourself instead of crabbing about the fact that you can't sell your cider. Shoot, you got to know people specialize in social media for a reason. It's a lot of work. It takes focus. It takes skill levels that you may not have with that kind of artistic eye to reach a wider audience. I also like to figure that it takes as much consideration as you would put into setting up your cidery or the apple varieties that you are planning to use or plant. From a consumer's perspective, you could tell what brands have social media strategy in place, and as a result, get a lot of engagement. That said, though, nothing beats a good story of how you love cider. And if you can relay that consistently, you are going to be bringing people into your loop. And there's no better place to be than in the loop. That builds brand loyalty, and honestly, it really is what cider's all about. Remember that each outlet requires a different skill set, but do know that YouTube still reigns as one of the world's largest social media platforms. Think of Latin America. They're not really on Facebook to the same degree that they are on YouTube. And that's something that we could get really blinders on and not realize that if you're reaching for the world, or you're trying to do that education broader beyond your own borders of your town or your state or your country, you got to look at the world picture. And we might think, wow, Facebook is where it all is, but not for non-native English speakers. So that's kind of interesting, I think, and something to remember. YouTube, right? Wow. And that is a huge different skill set. So yes, there is a bit to digest in all this. So if I may provide you with this week's homework, because I already know you did last week's homework, right? Which was to define your audience. Then this week, take the long view to determine if you are being consistent. Perhaps you will find that you're consistently missing your deadline to post on social media. Then try, if that's true, to set up a plan and pick one day and try to stick to that plan. It might give you a bit of breathing room, and it will certainly give your fans something to look forward to. Once again, I'd like to thank the panelists for this episode on brand strategy for cider from the Bringing the Bellies to the Bar presentation at CraftCon 2021. We had Pommelier, Cath Potter, cider writer Adam Wells, and Nikki Kong of Cat in the Glass, an online bottle shop. Well, I think roundabout now it's a good time for me to head up to the orchard and check in on Breda and Royal, two of our medlars which are in full bloom. So with that, I leave you here. This is Rhea Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider, we like palms, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like palms, we like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes we do. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There's a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Ba-da-da-dum. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We like orchards, having some fun. Yeehaw!